and the Greater Dayton Area League of Women Voters presents Meet the Candidates, your chance to learn about the candidates running for office in the November election.
Hi, I'm Patty Skilkin. I'm with the League of Women Voters of the Greater Dayton Area, and today I'm talking with one set of candidates that are running for governor and lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio. I'm going to be talking with Ed FitzGerald and Sharen Neuhardt. Ed is running for governor, Sharen is running for lieutenant governor. Mr. Kasich and Mary Taylor, who are also running, did not respond to our invitation to come here today. And Anita Rios from the Green Party and her partner, Bob Fitrakis, I think, are traveling and were unable to be here. So we're going to start. First of all, this is very informal. Since you don't have any opponents here, we don't have to worry about timing and giving everybody equal time, equal space, blah, blah, blah. So this is going to be a pretty chatty-Cathy kind of conversation. Speak as long as you need to, but remember, the shorter your question or answers are, the more we'll be able to cover in this interview. I'm going to start with Ed, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and how the two of you came to be running mates.
Sure. I'm 46 years of age. My wife and I have been married for almost 23 years. We have 4 children. I have 2 that are in college. One's at Xavier, as senior at Xavier, and the other one is a freshman at the University of Cincinnati. Those are my 2 sons. My daughters are a junior and freshman in high school. And my wife works at a public school system and has a second job at a hospital. Personally, my career, I've been in public service of one kind or another for more than 20 years. I was in law enforcement for 8 years as a prosecutor and as a special agent with the FBI. I was in local government as a city council person, as a mayor, and I'm a county official now in Cuyahoga County, which is the Cleveland area and the surrounding suburbs. And I've been somebody that's tried for most of my career to try to make government work for the average person, to try to reform it, try to make it more effective. And that's why I decided to run for governor, because I don't agree with the way the state's being run. Sharen and I met Sharen when she was running for Congress and got to know her through some mutual friends, and just really have grown to rely on her advice. In general, she's got a distinguished record, which she can speak to, but she's also somebody that's very keyed into the Dayton area. And I think sometimes the Dayton area feels rightfully that it is an afterthought in state government. And there's one thing I can guarantee you is that it will not be. She will not allow that to happen. And she's been a great asset on the campaign. She's become a very good friend, and I think she'll be a great lieutenant governor.
Yay, Dayton. Sharen,
Yes,
tell us a little bit about your background.
Born and raised in Dayton. Grew up, like I said, in Dayton. My dad was a City of Dayton policeman. My mom was a sales clerk at Elder Beerman's. And oldest of 4 girls. Went to all the Dayton public schools, off to college and law school, and decided to come home to practice law in my community. I'm a partner in the law firm of Thompson Hine, which has a good-sized office in Dayton. And I have 3 adult children, and my husband and I now live on a farm in Greene County, which is protected by conservation easements, so it can't ever be developed. It'll be farmland forever. Lots of people in the Dayton area know us because we're the folks that plant the sunflower field along 68 on their way to Young's Jersey Dairy, and folks from all over the Miami Valley love to come up there and get their pictures taken in the sunflower field.
Sounds fun. I think my kids actually made that trip once. Ed, let's go back to you. I think this is the first time in 38 years we haven't had an open debate among gubernatorial candidates. The media thinks the race has been decided, but here you are. Address these issues.
Well, elections are decided when people actually vote and they tabulate the votes. And I just think it's the height of arrogance, really, and contempt for the people that you're supposed to serve to say that you're not even going to submit to a public debate where you have to face your opponents and explain your positions and defend your record. As you said, it's been decades since we had a governor that was actually willing to just say, I'm not even going to participate in the process. And you know, we've had, in the last 3 decades, we've had governors' races that have been close, and we've had ones that have not been close, but all those governors felt like they had a responsibility to the voters. I'll give you a quick example. 4 years ago, I was running for a county office in my county. I was ahead in the polls by double digits. and I still participated in something like 20 different candidate forums with my opponents. That was at the county level. So how much more important is it for that to happen at the state level? I'll just say one more thing about that is the governor said that he didn't need to do that because he'd already answered everyone's questions because he had participated in some editorial board meetings for approximately 10.5 hours. Just think about what that says about a candidate, that you're entitled to 4 more years as governor because you submitted to 10 hours of questioning behind closed doors where your opponent wasn't there to say the other side of the story. I mean, it's just, it diminishes our democracy. I was asked the other day if it diminishes my campaign. I said, whether it helps my campaign or doesn't isn't really the point. It diminishes the democratic process.
Thank you. Incidentally, let me say this. I'm going to address questions to an individual, but if anybody wants to jump in, feel free. As I said, though, the shorter we keep it, the further we'll go. Sharen, what is a lieutenant governor and what do they do? On an average Thursday afternoon, should you're elected, what are you doing?
Well, as lieutenant governor, I will be probably running one of the state agencies. I will, so that will be my day-to-day responsibilities. I also will be backup for Ed on anything that he needs, and so it's really kind of like, it's kind of like being the vice president to the president of the United States. So I tell people I won't be sitting around eating bonbons. I expect to be working my fanny off on things like job creation and economic development because I'm a business lawyer, so been in the private sector a long time and I know about that, and that's my passion.
I don't think I know any women who sit around and eat bonbons anymore. I think those days are gone,
Right.
sadly,
They ever
maybe.
were. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Right.
Let's talk about jobs, and as I said, feel free to jump in here. Ed, I'm going to kind of address this to you. The Arizona State Business School does studies about job creation throughout the country. And a few years ago, we were ranked 41st out of 50 states in job creation. They just came out with new results, I believe, day before yesterday, and now we're at 45th in the nation. We've for 23 consecutive months, we have underperformed the national average in job creation. How would you create jobs in Ohio?
Well, and this is one of the reasons I think that Governor Kasich doesn't want to participate in a debate, because they're really trying to dumb down the discussion about economics and the job situation in Ohio. The reason I say that is that Governor Kasich's main talking point is that, well, we lost jobs between 2006 and 2010, but since he's been elected, we've gained jobs from 2010 to 2014. And which sounds pretty good until you subject it to any kind of scrutiny at all. Because all you have to point out is a couple things. Number one is every single state lost jobs between 2006 and 2010. All 50 states did. And all 50 states gained jobs in the last 4 years. All of them. So the question isn't whether we gained jobs, because every single state did. And as I said to him yesterday when I saw him, I said, are you saying Jerry Brown is doing a great job as governor of California? I mean, what do you, but of course this would be absurd, because the Republican Party in states that have lagged in job growth have been criticizing Democratic incumbent governors. The question is, how do we rank compared to the rest of the country? And as you pointed out, we rank 45th out of 50 states. Not only that, but it's not just a question of whether or not people are employed, it's what are they earning? And other academic studies, these aren't political claims, these are academic studies, other academic studies have shown that the vast majority of jobs that have been created in the last 4 years have been low wage or minimum wage jobs. We now have 10% of this state that is only making a minimum wage. We have 50% of the state, it's estimated, is living paycheck to paycheck. So the economy is very rough for a lot of people, Now, what can we do about it? Well, for one thing, we should start funding the kind of things that get people out of poverty, and that's things like education, which we've been short funding in the last 4 years. But it also means that our economic development strategy should be focused on, in my opinion, on small businesses. That's where most of the jobs are created. As Sharen was mentioning, she has expertise in representing businesses. There have been a few businesses that have gotten an enormous amount of help from the state of Ohio, but they haven't created a lot of jobs. It's one of the reasons we're lagging. And small businesses, what I would call Main Street businesses, are frequently left out. And we can have economic development policies, because we have them in my county, that prioritize those businesses, and that's one of the things I think the state should do.
Thank you. Sharen, we're going to get back to some of these with you again, probably. But you are quite an advocate for women's issues. Women's health, women's wages. Tell us about that.
I am, and it's not just because I'm a woman, although I've had these strong feelings my whole life. But you know what people like to talk about, and when Ed selected me for his running mate, they quickly labeled me as, oh, she's a lifelong advocate of abortion rights, like that's the only woman's issue that exists. And like I told the Plain Dealer reporter the other day when it was brought up, somebody was asking me about some business transaction I did, and I looked at him and said, remember this, I actually have a day job, you know, so you can don't need to always be labeling me in this fashion. But for me, what Governor Kasich and that Republican-controlled legislature did in the last budget to put in these very, very harmful restrictions for women's access to health care in the dead of the night without any debate is just, it's shameful, and it's something that most people don't even understand. And I'll just tell you one thing, for example. Governor Kasich and the legislature put in place funding for rape crisis centers, but only so long as the rape crisis center does not mention to the woman that if she's raped, a couple of her options are maybe the morning after pill or to terminate the pregnancy. They're not allowed to tell people that, even though John Kasich, and he said yesterday at the Plain Dealer that he views that abortion should be legal, at least in the case of rape and incest and life of the mother, but he won't support having the rape crisis centers who provide counseling to women who have been raped. He won't let them tell them that one of their options is terminating a pregnancy. That's just wrong. But you know, so these restrictions on women's health are just not good, and they're not good for women, and they're not good for the state of Ohio. But women's issues really are a lot broader than that. Well, I believe that women should be paid the same as a man. I believe in pay equity, equal pay for equal work. Think, Patty, what a phenomenal difference that could make in Ohio if a woman, and you know, generally now women make 23 cents on the dollar less than a man for a comparable job. If women got paid the same as the man in this Ohio economy, think about how much better Ohio families would be and the Ohio economy would be. I also, and Ed can talk to this more, but we support raising the minimum wage because it's the right thing to do for everybody, but in particular, it's the right thing to do for women because 2/3 of the folks that make minimum wage in this state are women. So I think the governor is dismissive of women. I think, for example, that private economic development agency that he's put into place, Jobs Ohio, doesn't have one woman on its board. If you look at the appointments John Kasich has made, he doesn't value women's input. All he wants are their votes.
Thank you. Let's shift gears here to the environment. Ed, we'll go back to you. The Toledo water disaster. Was that preventable? How would it have been preventable? How can we prevent it in the future?
Sure, it was entirely preventable. I mean, it was caused by human activity, and we know what that activity was, and there were plenty of warning signs far in advance. As a matter of fact, there are people who have left the Ohio EPA who said that they were trying to warn the Kasich administration that this was going to happen. It's happening because of, in large part because of runoff from the agriculture industry and from fertilizers that are applied to fields and not properly segmented from water systems. That's what's causing it. There's some other causes to it, but that's by far the main cause of it, and everybody knows it. And so people kept warning us about this. Matter of fact, a year before it happened, I got together some folks from nonprofits and environmental groups and academics in Cuyahoga County because we were warning about it in Cuyahoga County. Now that isn't where it happened, but we said, look, the writing is on the wall. This is going to happen if we don't start treating this runoff as a toxic substance. And what did the governor do? Well, he just said, well, we need to balance the concerns of the fertilizer industry and those that use fertilizer with the concerns about safe drinking water. Well, you don't balance those two things. Safe drinking water should be an absolute. Now here's the thing that's really shocking though. After the crisis happens, which was really a black eye for all of Ohio, and as we probably all know, one of the big assets that Ohio has is Lake Erie. It's this enormous body of fresh water, which is increasingly a precious resource. So it was actually an attraction for companies and people to move to Ohio. So we took that and we've ruined the storyline by now becoming known all over the world, by the way, not just all over the country, as being a major metropolitan area, 500,000 people that went 72 hours without safe drinking water. Now here's the thing that's incredible about it though, is I already talked about how they kept delaying and delaying even when people were warning them that this was going to happen. After it happens, they're talking the same language. They're still saying, well, maybe there should be some voluntary goals that local farmers can meet, and then over time maybe we will get to a better circumstance. They're still not responding to it as if it is the crisis that it is. They're still not saying, okay, we've got to treat this runoff as a toxic substance. They have put some more money into the system, but they're talking about treating the water when it goes into the water treatment plant from the lake after it's already been contaminated. I mean, wouldn't you think it would make more sense to stop it from being contaminated than just focusing on treating it once it already has been contaminated? And they still have this balancing test, which is really putting public health concerns behind the needs and desires of the fertilizer industry. And I think it's just, I just think it's indefensible.
I also thought it was interesting because I read and keep up with during the time when this crisis was going on. Mm-hmm. You have 400,000 people without drinking water. And John Kasich's comments about it are, isn't it great that we got all these corporations like Kroger's and Walmart and Target to bring in all this extra water to help people? Yeah. I'm really happy that they did that, but that's not a good solution for dealing with this crisis, and it's something that we need to pay attention to here in the Miami Valley, because our aquifer and the clean water that we have is one of the greatest assets in the Miami Valley, and we have to be protecting that, and John Kasich hasn't given that a second thought.
Ed, assuming you're elected, what's the first thing you'd like to do if you had ultimate power? If you had ultimate power, what would be the top of your agenda?
Boy, I guess if I could just do one thing immediately, would probably be to provide early childhood education for every single child in Ohio. And by the way, there are states that are doing that, so it's not really something that's pie in the sky. We could do it for about $500 million in this state, which that's a lot of money, but we're talking about a $62 billion budget. So, one of the things I think that speaks well for my candidacy is I've put administrations together before at the city level and at the county level. So if we're successful the day after the election, Sharen and I will sit down and we'll start to put together an administration that reflects the talent and diversity of the state, different than the way John Kasich put his administration together, which was almost entirely white men when he put it together. And we'll put together a team that's really going to reflect those values. And then we're going to come up with a legislative agenda. And it's going to include things like early childhood education, restoring the cuts to K through 12 education, which has hit the Dayton area particularly hard, by the way. Restoring some of those local government funds, which we took a 50% cut in local government funds. That also hit the Dayton area very, very hard, both the county and the city and all the townships and villages within the county. So we need to start, because that hit fire departments and police departments and street repair. So a lot of those communities are suffering. We'd like to provide them some relief. We'd make a proposal to increase the minimum wage. We'd start trying to undo some of these, I think, very pernicious laws about women's rights and women's health care. And then we would do our best to negotiate with this legislature. Now, we'd also like to see some political reform, because our legislature is really extreme. One of the reasons it's so extreme is that it's the product of a gerrymandered legislature, and we'd like to fix that as well. Now, I will say one question that I get a lot is when people say, well, if you get elected, you're going to be dealing with this pretty unreasonable legislature. How are you going to get anything through? And all I can say is we'll push as hard as we can in the right direction. We'll hope that the voters give us a more reasonable legislature than we have right now. But we also have the option to take an issue to the ballot directly. We have that ability in Ohio, and other governors have done that on different funding issues and so forth. So we'd have to decide, okay, if we're going to take 2 or 3 issues to the ballot directly, we should do that. If that's the only, I don't think that's ideal. I'd rather go through the legislature, but if the legislature is going to be obstinate, if it's going to be obstructionist like we've seen happen in Washington, it's a nice thing that in Ohio that if we don't get our wish list, we can say, well, We know we represent the people's views on this, so we're going to go ahead and take it straight to the people.
Sharon, if elected, would you have a pet project, and what would it be?
One of the first things I'd like to do is, and Ed has heard me say this, is to talk about economic development in a different way. I believe that we aren't paying enough attention to those good, strong Ohio businesses who are already here, who get no attention from the state, who get very little help from the state, but who we don't have to convince to come because they're already here. They like Ohio. They're raising their families in Ohio. And we have to ask them, what can we do to help you add jobs? How can we help you so that next office you put in isn't in Indiana or Michigan, it's in Ohio? So I'd like to start having those conversations and bringing the business community into the picture here in a way that they've not been brought into the picture and under this Kasich administration.
Charter schools, yay or nay? Some people think it's the beginning of the end of the public school system. Some people think it's a wonderful opportunity for challenged students to get an education they're going to need in their future lives. What are your feelings?
Well, I think they were justified. Originally, the justification was that if a public school system was failing, that kids ought to have an opportunity to go somewhere else. The problem is, what we've seen happen is, you've seen people come in that are really in it to make money. And they've been very successful at making money. They haven't been too successful at actually providing an education. So you have some of the worst performing schools in Ohio are some of these for-profit charter schools. Of course, they've been under investigation now by the FBI, some of them, and they're just not accountable. And there's a real connection between the folks running those schools and some political donations that have been made to Governor Kasich and his friends. And basically, they were purchasing political influence to put them beyond the reach of basically standards of accountability. That's what's gone wrong. So we're on pace to spend almost $1 billion, even though a lot of those schools have awful records, terrible graduation rates, and they've been funded at the expense of public schools. Anything you want to add?
You're nodding, so I can tell you agree with
well,
everything I just said.
Also, Patty, recently the Dane Daily News came out with the report cards on the charter schools in the Miami Valley. They listed 17 or 18 of those schools, with the exception of DECA and maybe the DECA Elementary School. Every single one of them got Fs. And they're sucking all this money out of our public schools in Montgomery County. Not just the poor performing public schools, but the really good performing charter school or good performing public schools are losing money to these charters. It's an abomination, and it needs to be stopped.
We've been talking to Ed FitzGerald and Sharen Neuhardt, who are running for governor and lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio. They are Democrats. They're here to tell you their story and ask for your vote. The League of Women Voters is your source for everything. If you're voting absentee, don't put an X in the little circle. You have to fill it in totally with either blue or black ink. Be sure and put enough postage on it. It'll tell you how much. Mail it soon. Don't wait till the last minute. Absentee ballots are the first ballots to be counted, so get it in there. If you have any questions about your polling place or anything else, call the League. We can answer almost everything. 228-4041. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharen.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience.